beyond just digital transformation. Now, the thing is, I've written it before Corona. I wrote it in 2019, and it was published late 2019, the English version actually just a couple of days before the Belgian Corona lockdown. So it did not foresee something like Corona, but in a way it did. So I will walk you through the book, or briefly through some of the ideas of the book, but I think that the purpose of today is try to investigate how the book and the ideas that I have created specifically for the book, how they actually resonate even more now that we have this Corona experience. So I will start with a short history lesson. When I'm in the business, the digital business, for about 25 years, even a little bit more, every year, a bit more. And before I started my digital career, I created the first digital agency in Belgium a bit by accident. Before that, actually, the economical situation and how companies were organized, it was all very straightforward. It's all very simple. So you had very big organizations, often, and even the small ones, they behaved like big ones, and they were slow, and you could compare them to the big ships that have difficulties in changing course. But the thing was, it was not really necessary. They had time to plan forward. There was no such thing as a digital world. Now that started to change when I started my career, and actually that was the basis of my career, making companies digital. Now, that first wave of making companies digital in itself was exciting, and yet not that very exciting, because the only thing we did actually was we made their back offices digital. So their processes became digital processes, and their products became digital variants of the same. And we made their front offices digital. So making websites for them and interactive systems, and then going on social and mobile. But in the essence, our clients didn't change. A bank remained a bank, but a digital bank. And a media company remained a media company with the same products, and often selling the same products at the same prices, but this time with a digital variant. But that started to change about a decade ago. About a decade ago, we all started to realize that the digital potential was there to actually change the core of the business. We all, by now, after about a decade of this digital disruption and digital transformation thingy, we know all of the examples. We know the Spotifys that have changed the business model of music. Instead of buying CDs and albums, you have a subscription to music. And we see it everywhere, in every domain. There is no part of the industry today or society that is safe for digital, actually creating new solutions for all problems, often with a different business logic and different way of invoicing and so on. Now, this is getting exciting for a lot of players, because for the first time, for a lot of companies, well, this status quo is challenged, and small sharks and piranhas and whatever you want to call them in these waters, in these used to be cold waters, are now challenging parts of the business. Now imagine, and for the sake of the book, that was my assumption, imagine we know this. Imagine as a bank, or as a construction company, or as a media company, or as a retailer, it doesn't matter, you know this. You know your digital challenges. You know they are out there. You, based on what they do differently, you can create an image of what the future could look like. And you embrace that future. And you say, let's make a transformation strategy. And then you make a tactical plan, and you say, let's act upon the plan. Now, imagine you all have that. To be honest, we still work for a lot of clients in that industry. We know some of them see the future, have a plan, but executing upon the plan is very difficult. But imagine you have it. And what I say in my book and what I say in this presentation is, what if that is not enough? What if creating strategy for tomorrow? If you want to do that, it's not enough to understand how you get challenged in a digital way, how you should get an answer towards companies like Facebook or Google or Amazon or the likes. No, in society, other things are changing too. And this, of course, depends a bit on the region in the world you're in. But if we are looking at the West, or if you're looking at these regions in the world that for the last 75 years after the Second World War, more or less evolved in a similar way, well, we all are facing societal disruptions that are equally impacting your strategy as the digital challenges are. What are they? In the book, I describe 3 perfect storms. And the first one is the perfect storm of work. Knowing that in society today, the notion of what work is changing. That is not something new and something Corona related. That is something that has been going on even for decades, and definitely the last couple of years, in the last decade, we have seen the acceleration of talking about the emergence of AI and further deployment of robotics, but also what is work? Are we all independent in the future, or are we all driving delivery bikes, or what is work? Should we work longer because we live longer? So there were a lot of questions going around in society, creating anxiety and fear with people, because that created uncertainty about their future. So that's the first perfect storm. Now the second one is the perfect storm of the physical place, the perfect storm in living, where it all happens. So again, for the last 75 years, in our parts of the world, and I mean, and again, similar regions, what we saw was that we created a model of working somewhere, living somewhere else, because living was perfect here and the best jobs were there, and our kids went to school in yet another place. And in my book, I call this model linear living. It's not literally that we all live like a long and winding road and everyone has their houses dispersed, but often like in Belgium and the Netherlands, it's absolutely the case. But still the model of not living where we do the other things, not having our houses where we do our work and education and entertainment, but having to move between that. Again, in society, you feel that this is starting to get challenged. Opinions, voices saying, well, we should all live in large cities, because in large cities, everything is being catered for. Whether that's a good idea, question mark. But how we have organized ourselves the last 75 years, well, you feel it's not sustainable. And that brings me to the third perfect storm, and that's all of the changes we see coming in mobility. And then you start to see the pattern. And this is why I've picked these three perfect storms, because they are very much interrelated. So if you change something in one domain, it has an impact on things in the other domains. Maybe the problem becomes bigger, but maybe solving something left actually also solves something right in the scheme. So this is what I call, together with many other challenges that we are facing and that we feel that we are facing, and that society is talking about and is again feeling afraid about and maybe getting angry about, everything together, adding climate change to this, adding problems like feeding the world population, migration, multi-diverse societies, and so on and so on, everything together, I call that the megastorm. Now, I focus on these three perfect storms, the future of work, living, and mobility, because a lot of what we see as our world, as our society, as our economy is built upon that. Another reason why I take these three is because you can easily impact them and you can see it. So if a city decides to impact any of these three, in a couple of years, you can start to feel the effect. It's not like with climate change that we have to invest now to see the effect in 30, 40, 50 years from now, because that's too abstract. So this is this model of the megastorm that I describe in my book as trying to get like an inventory of the challenges that we face and why we feel that a group of people in our civilization, in our society, is actually tending towards pessimism, while for over 250 years, the dominant feeling in society was optimism for growth. And I will explain that in a minute. So we had this future optimism that has driven our society, our culture, our economics, our medical developments, everything forward, because we believed that a problem could be solved. So we invested in it. We were optimistic that we could get the result, and we did solve that problem. And for the last couple of years, we get people saying, well, tomorrow will be not so good as yesterday, even worse, probably, maybe much worse than yesterday. We didn't believe in that future anymore. That was actually the reason why I decided to start to write the book. I personally also started to feel like that. So I was on a quest, and I've written the book because I wanted to write an optimistic story for the future with everything that we are facing now. And then now the question in this presentation is that still valid with Corona? So, so we have these drivers that create that pessimism. On the one hand, as I already described, this metastorm with all of these real challenges in work and mobility and living and climate and so on, real issues that we have to resolve. But at the same time, there's something else playing, something deeper, something like almost like a depression in our society. And in my book, I describe this with this S-curve model that I've created. And this S-curve it's a timeline. It's 75 years of modern history. It starts just after the Second World War. At the left of the slides, you have this moment of have less, have little. We came out of the Second World War, And globally, actually, we didn't have a lot, but what we did have was potential for growth. So we had a perspective, we had the hope for gaining things. And indeed, in those 75 years, we have seen the world evolve. We have seen poverty evolve. We have seen medical care evolve and educational systems evolve and political systems evolve, and our housing got better, and we got mobility, both social mobility, real mobility, job mobility. So everything for the last 75 years, we had this acceleration of emancipation for everyone in the field, actually. I mean, again, in our part of the world, but for many other regions in the world, this is starting to happen, or this is happening now. This started to happen maybe 20 years ago in the Far East, people getting stable jobs and slowly getting out of this place where you had where you had the perspective of getting out of that. And that was valid for the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s, and then it started to change. Then we started to see the globalization kick in, and then it became digital in the 90s, and we got the service economy, which was more intangible. So a lot of people started to feel left behind. And at the same time, in this last decade, if you look at, I mean, listen to the media, listen to politicians, it's all about doing less. So we should consume less. You cannot build here anymore. We have to protect that. You cannot drive with your car in that city center anymore. So it is all about letting go, which is normal if you have a lot. Maybe the dominant sentiment becomes, well, if I have a lot, I can lose a lot. If I have little, I can gain a lot. So where this sentiment in the first couple of decades after the Second World War was an optimistic one, today you can understand that we get this collective psychology of fear of losing. Now, indeed, if you then know that, I mean, all of the digital accelerations we are still facing and no one knows the outcome of, if you know the VUCA world we're living in, and then, I mean, the uncertainty that we knew was there, and then Corona makes clear that literally in just a couple of days or weeks, it can shut down the world. I mean, it's understandable that there's so much uncertainty, and uncertainty maybe leads to fear, and fear leads to anger, and then we know what comes out of that. So this is what I describe in the book, but of course, without the Corona element in it. Now, the book, as I already said, it's a path, it's a journey. And for me, it resembles a lot, or it reminds me a lot of an Eastern saying that I picked up, I think 20, 25 years ago, and that goes something like this. If you go up a mountain walking and you keep on going, eventually you will go back down again. But of course, if you really want to keep on going, you have to learn how to fly. That's the Eastern saying. And for me, this is such a beautiful metaphor of where we probably are in this modern society. We are at the top of that mountain, which is an extremely good place. So in 75 years, we climbed the mountain, and a lot of people say, if we keep on walking as we are doing today, we will go back down again. And probably we are, if we keep on doing it the way we do it. The question I ask in the book, with everything that is coming towards us, is it possible to write this optimistic vision for a decade from now, where we don't have to go down, where we keep on going up, but in a different way? So in the book, I explore the future of maybe work and place where we live, and education and economic models and healthcare and shopping and many other things. And I place that futuristic vision, I place that in a future a decade from now. And my assumption in that future is that a limited group of people, and I call them the substantial minority, but a limited group of people will voluntarily adopt these new ways of living. Work where you live, for instance. Travel less with cars, for instance. Have more e-commerce. Study from a distance. And I will dive back deeper in the last part of the presentation in a couple of these examples. So in my book, I describe this optimistic future because I believe it is possible. And I give it a decade from now, which is realistic. It's not too far away, and it's not tomorrow, and it's not for everyone. It's for what I assume, that substantial minority, and my assumption is 30% of the people, 30% of manufacturing, 30% of commerce could happen like that in a decade. And if that would be the case, the world would already be a completely different place. And then Corona happens. And a lot of the core ideas that I described as something optimistic in the book are forced upon people in a negative way because of lockdowns for those regions that had lockdowns. So suddenly, yes, we had to work where we live because we couldn't leave the house. It was prohibited to leave the house. And yes, we had to buy everything online because all the stores were closed, again, in a lot of countries. So in just 10 days, when a lockdown hits, all of those basic ideas that I described became a reality. But what I describe in my book is like the tropical island version of that future, with white sands and blue sea and palm trees. Why? What happened with the lockdown of Corona is like the prison break version with a gray prison cell, and we are forced to stay in. We don't want that. But what would happen if everything that we now see, those new patterns, if they last long enough, if they don't just last for 3 weeks, what we originally hoped for, or 3 months, and we are way beyond the 3 months by now, what if it lasts for like a year, 10 months, for instance? One of the new patterns in every aspect of education and living and work and economy and retail and so on, what aspects would have changed forever? That's the key question. And then actually my book becomes a guide again, although it was not written to be a guide for Corona, because it can predict what kind of elements could actually stay in that new normal. Now, a recent model, not in the book that I've created for this, is the Corona pendulum. And with that, I mean that before Corona, actually, we had the old normal. We worked in the office, we studied in schools, we went to shops to buy stuff, we went to the theaters, and we did everything, and we had a normal job, and we made normal living, and we paid normal taxes, and we had a normal economy, and the global supply chain was functioning as it always did. What else? I mean, we had all of these things. And then suddenly, from one moment to the other, the pendulum did swing completely the opposite direction, and it landed into this Corona lockdown situation. You can't call it a normal, it was a situation. And that was completely the opposite. So we had to stay home and work from home, shop from home, study from home, you know. And then from the economical part, in a lot of regions in the world, we actually, we paused the economy. We didn't have to pay taxes, and we didn't have to pay our loans, and we got a replacement income in many European countries. In other regions, that's a bit a more difficult situation. And we didn't travel, while before that we traveled a lot. And actually even climate emissions collapsed. I mean, it was very positive for clean air and other things, of course, not sustainable. So the question is, if now lockdown is slowly, if it's released, if we can let go of lockdown, what will happen? We are going to swing back. Question is, how much? How much will we swing back? Will we swing back entirely to where we were? And then you hear a lot of people, from politicians to companies to their employees to many people, my kids, 10 and 15 years old, saying, I don't want to go back to school. They don't want to go to school. But I mean, a lot of people say, we don't want to go back entirely to that old situation. But so where will the pendulum stop? Probably for all of these domains, they will stop in a different position, which is fine. But I assume it will never swing back entirely to the start position before Corona. So what will that new world look like when we have, when we start adopting these patterns? Nobody really knows, but it could be something like this middle path, a distant society. So we will, for at least maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, we will organize things from a distance, and then they become maybe the new normal. Who will ever pay with cash again if you have stopped paying with cash for a year? I mean, who will pick up cash again in 2 years from now? Hybrid workspaces. So sometimes you go to the job, sometimes you work from home, sometimes you go to the school, sometimes you study from home, sometimes you go to a theater, sometimes you just live stream it and you watch it from home. So all of those hybrid situations, the local economy, the globalized economy, that new balance, more parts might be local while we still believe in globalization, so many other things. And again, we don't know. We have no clue. So can we look at the future? Can we look at a future that if the situation of Corona lockdown lasts at least 10 months and it becomes part of the new normal, what could that future be like? Now, before I dive into that, there's one other thing that I really want to make clear. That is, it's not enough to engineer an exit strategy. That's fine, but that's not enough. What we need is an entry strategy. What do I mean by that? I mean, an exit strategy is something like this. You take a direction, you say, well, if we walk that direction, we can get out of the lockdown situation. So actually, that's this path. Up till the moment that you're out. But then the question is, what is the continuation of the path? Where does it take us? What is the new normal? What are the elements, the good ones and the bad ones, of that future? And you can compare it with like being locked for months in a nuclear shelter after a nuclear incident. And of course, you want to get out of the shelter. So you create an exit plan out of your lockdown in that shelter. And that will take care of, I mean, is there still radiation? Is it safe to leave? Does the hatch still function? All these kind of things. That's part of your lockdown exit strategy. The question is, if you're out, what do? Do you actually stay in maybe this nuclear wasteland? Or do you say, well, let's move maybe first for a couple of months or even years through the nuclear wasteland, but let's move to like a new world vision. An idea of maybe ideally the same world as we knew it, but with improvements. So it's not too strange. So that's why we need an entry strategy. Now, what could that look like? Again, we don't really know, but in the book, I predict a couple of elements for the future. Now, it's not really predicting the future. It's an easy trick I use. It's a very simple one. It's what I call the 30% trick. And the essence of the trick is that you just look at things that are happening today, but that are very marginal, that most people are not using, that are technically feasible, but still too expensive. It's not mainstream. You can't mass produce it and whatever. But then you assume what in a decade from now, enough people embrace it, 30%. Maturity, the technology matures enough to make it, I mean, feasible to become an alternative, for instance, to different ways of doing things. So it's not about inventing things that doesn't exist. It's about imagining what if things that do exist today become bigger and more important. So in the next couple of minutes, I will walk you rapidly through a couple of these futuristic ideas, but I will always relate them to what's happening today and where we can make choices today. So yes, in that future, I very much believe that machines will have taken over a lot of the things we do. We will have to work alongside with machines. That will be a reality. It's unstoppable. One of the forces of Corona is that many companies embrace digital faster than before. So they will embrace AI and they will embrace robotics as a way of protecting them if there's a next Corona-like system shock in the future. So yes, they will work alongside with machines in a decade from now. But if we make the right choice, it will not be the left scenario, because the left scenario is what I call a cutoff scenario, and it's not a good one. The left scenario is a scenario in which we say we can replace entire jobs by machines. So these people, we don't need them anymore. Cut them off. The people in the middle, we can keep. Now, if we would do that, we would create an enormous crisis that actually, because of Corona, and I see in the chat, millions of people already lost their jobs. Well, even without Corona, if we don't manage this man-machine collaboration thing properly, that would happen anyway, and that is still bound to happen if we don't watch out. But we can watch out. We can go to the left, the right scenario, which I call is a shave-off model. And actually, the idea of the shave-off model is very simple. Let's not cut off jobs, but cut off specific tasks in a job, give them to machines, and have the rest of the time, let people invest the rest of the time into more the human side of the job. Now that would actually mean that every job in the future has a human and a tech side. Whether you're a doctor and using the machine to help you diagnose patients, and then you have more time to actually treat your patients, talk to them, help them psychologically, well, that would be a new balance between man and machine. And whether you're a truck driver and you have an autonomous truck for 80–90% of the situations, but you still have to take over every once in a while, well, then again, you would maybe even work with the same AI as the doctor. So regardless of the job, whether you're a bookkeeper or a marketeer or a salesman in wherever, in a store or somewhere else, you probably will have a machine making you smarter, doing things faster, doing the boring things or the insecure things, while you as a human being can focus on the rest. Now, this is something we can plan today. If we just fire people and hire machines, then it will not happen. If we actually try to find new balances, for every time a new release of technology allows something more, and we then give more human tasks to people, we just reinvent existing jobs. So that's a choice we make now. One of the other things I describe in that future is that because of high-tech evolutions, manufacturing can return closer to the place where we consume. Now, today we have in the West, we consume a lot, and most of what we consume, it is produced in the Far East or somewhere else. with a lot of questions about, is this sustainable, and what about employment, and so on. What we get, and what we have been getting for years already, is technology that allows it to bring production back. Like in this case, in this slide, it's a shoe bot. So this makes clothes. This is a robot making clothes. In the future, that could be a reality, but actually today it's already a reality. Companies like Nike, Adidas are already experimenting with this. They stop their experiments in some cases because it's not mature yet. But what if, because of what happened with Corona, we accelerate these kinds of revolutions with 3D manufacturing and 3D printing and micro factories with robots and so on. All of the things are there, but they can't compete with mass-produced stuff somewhere far away. But maybe in the near future, we can compete with that because the technology matures, and maybe we get taxes on the other level of production. Maybe the same will happen with farming. Not a lot of people know about this, but slowly it's getting into the mainstream. But what if in a decade from now, at least maybe 30% of our food would be grown locally in vertical farms? These are high-tech environments, closed environments, so no pesticides, hardly any water usage. And we can grow anything we like, and we have a yield, so return on the investment, actually, in the farming investment, which is even up to 15 times higher for lettuce, for instance, than any traditional way. What if that could be the future? Well, again, this is not the future. Again, this is actually part of reality. Kimball Musk, I mean, the brother of the notorious Elon Musk, invests in those vertical farms. His vertical farms are aimed at growing stuff in supermarkets, not somewhere else and brought to supermarkets. Jeff Bezos, again, someone you know, Amazon, he actually invested hundreds of millions privately in vertical farms for China, not for the US, not for Europe, not for the Middle East, but for China. And the small thingy that you can see at the left side of my slide, that's actually my own personal vertical farm in my kitchen. So I grow my own lettuce and basil, and it works. It's not profitable, but it works. Now, we see other things happening in that future too, like artificial meat, but also things like firming, not farming, firming, creating food through fermentation. And again, this could be the future, but this is happening now. This is happening now. This is a Finnish company that launched this year that is making something that are the basic building blocks from milk to anything we eat, but in a completely artificial way. These are bacteria with fermentation that are building the building blocks of the food that we know and want to eat. So this is today, but what if that becomes mainstream tomorrow? Now, in that future, I also describe, one of my assumptions is that a large group of people, not a majority, but let's say 30%, they want to live where they, work where they live. So they don't want to move, and they don't want to commute, and they don't want to be stuck in traffic. No, they just want to embrace what I call circular living. And what is that model of circular living? Actually, it's the opposite of what we have been building for the last 75, namely linear living. I don't live where I work, and my kids do not go to school where I live and work, and I shop somewhere else, and everything is dispersed, and we need this network of mobility driven by the individual ownership of cars. Again, this gave us our freedom in the last 75 years, but maybe it's not the ideal model for the next 75 years. Historically, every old city and village was created round, circular. Why? Because that is the nearest distance between functions. Now, of course, in Carcassonne, in this slide, for instance, they had hardly any functions compared to modern life. But today, through modern technology, we are able, through e-commerce, remote work and education and healthcare, and all of the things we have embraced and actually were forced upon, we were forced upon us because of Corona, actually they allow us to be much more often in the same place to live, to work, for leisure, for entertainment, for culture, you name it. So regrouping these, reconnecting these core functions. This is what I mean with this circular living model. Now, this again is not science fiction. In every city or in every country around the world, we see cities where regions are developed like that, where like in Belgium, these are two examples, but also in France, in Paris, where the mayor said a couple of months ago, the dream is that we now build infrastructure so people can do anything they need, everything they want, in a maximum of 15 minutes of micro mobility commute. So with an electric scooter or by foot or by bike. And if you look at the two other examples at the left and the right of the slide, these are new sites that have been developed and are just live in Belgium, where you have hundreds, some cases thousands of living units combined with working spaces for offices, services, but also for make industry. So there are new style factories that are attracted to be there. And there's culture and there is education, and it's all there. So you don't have to move to live there and to have access to all of the key functions in our lives. Now, one of the ideas here is that if you want to, I mean, one of the things happening with Corona is that everyone works from home, and we don't want that. We want to see people. One of the ideas I describe in the book that could be a reality tomorrow, and it's already slowly starting today, is what I call the co-working spaces for the boring people. What I mean by that is that typically co-working spaces are for people like this, hipsters with the right beard, the right coffee, the right attributes, and this is for hip people with hip professions. But what if we could create workspaces nearby or in the neighborhoods where people live, where people every day could come to, meet other people, sometimes colleagues of their direct employer, sometimes other people, and people can work from any place in the world for any other location, for any employer, wherever in the world or in the country. Now, this could actually happen. This is an example for Belgium in all of these smaller cities, so people don't have to commute to that 2 or 3 places where normally the headquarters of all of these companies are. So this is one of the things that I described for the future, but they are already materializing today. And from the moment that we get this kind of living together format almost, you get a fertile ground to start building new business models, the sharing economy, solution economy, new ways of mobility, e-commerce, all of these things. So we get things like Deliveroo and the likes, we get new home delivery e-commerce models. They are not, I mean, they're not available if you don't get this functional density. And I don't mean with that density that everyone has to live together in cities with millions of people. This can be villages with just a couple of thousands or dozens of thousands of tens of thousands of people, but with enough density. So they work and they live and they sleep and they entertain, and it's all happening there. And then you have enough basis to start building smaller platforms on top of that, or the big ones like Uber and the others, to actually create these new economical models. Now, skip this one. One of the interesting is we work a lot for food companies. And one of the interesting things is that you start to see that they say, well, we could grow food locally, right? With these vertical farms. We could even process it locally. So no longer in those huge factories where they make all of the meat and all of the vegetables and all of the sweets and whatever they make. No, more locally. And actually they say, if we make it locally, why don't we show it? So it becomes like an experience. And why can't people taste it? And why can't they buy it? So then actually you almost get like the short chain at the shortest possible. What you see now today in Europe in microbreweries, so they don't grow the wheat, but they make the beer, and it's a cafe and you can taste it, you can drink there and you can buy it. So it's getting these new experiences, creating new employment, by the way, if that would actually happen. Now, one of the other things in that future is that maybe the notion of ownership of a lot of things, but also property, will change. Maybe in that future, a certain amount of people will embrace the fact that if they buy a house, it's not theirs. They just buy shares in a cooperative model, for instance, which would create a much more flexibility and freedom. And if you start researching, you see that today in Switzerland, about 20% of the people, the property in Zurich is already owned in that way. So these are people that are having shares in cooperative models and not just having their own apartment or their own house. So interesting ideas. Now, the last part that I haven't described yet in that future is, what about that problem of mobility? Yes, of course, if we have these urban villages with circular living, with this functional density, we could start to organize shared micromobility, as you see in every decent city around the world happening. Now, that could happen in many more places if that would be the case. Well, the question is, will it be the car manufacturers that are in control, that are in the lead of their own future, by electrifying their fleets, by creating self-driving autonomous cars, and so on? Will it be them? And to be honest, I don't believe it's them. I believe that the real change in mobility will come from a change in behavior that we as people have, and that is created by how we work, where we work, the kind of work we have, how we live, where we live, how we e-commerce and other solutions are brought to us. But if we embrace only partially these new ways of living, it will have a huge impact on mobility. A lot of people with 2 cars, like in my case, I mean, for the last 3.5 months, I mean, I've driven like 2 days with those 2 cars, or my wife and me. So in a future where we would have less need for mobility, we probably would use less cars. So of course, electrify them, please. But driving less will have more effect than driving the same amount of kilometers with electrified cars in that case. Now, another thing that actually is driving this forward are the decisions by local communities and by cities. They have the key for city development. So if they say we develop regions, urban villages, circular models where you can live and work and go to school and all in that same mix, if they say at the same time we will ban old school cars with combustion engines that are polluting, and we even ban cars in the city centers, you have to go by foot or whatever, they have the key for that. They don't have to go to a global authority in the country or on another level. They can decide for themselves, and they are doing that. They have been doing that for over a decade now. We already see the impact happening now. So that was that future. Now back again to Corona. How much of this can be an inspiration for that future? Now, first, I'm almost at the end of my story. First, this. Now, there are 5 phases of Corona transformation as we see it now. Now, the first phase was the panic phase. We went into lockdown. We had to stay home. We didn't know how that worked, studying from home or working from home. So that was the panic phase, a couple of first 2-3 weeks. And then we started going into the process phase. If you can't read the text online, it's okay. You will get the slides. It's just for the labels. The process phase was still the same, from the idea that we should be able to return rapidly to the old normal. How we fix this for now. So how can we optimize our remote education and how can we work from home in a decent way? So that was the process phase. I'm a retailer. I don't have a lot of investments in online. How can I accelerate my online so at least I sell something when every store is closed? That was process phase. Slowly, we're getting into the third phase. This is now. We are getting into the prospect phase. And the prospect phase is, well, what if this takes longer than just 3 months, as I already said? What if the future absolutely will look differently? And this is the question we are starting to get now from a lot of companies saying, well, we believe that we should have a vision of the future, the near future, not 10 years from now, but we can get inspired by that 10 years from now. But what will be that future? And if we see that future, we have the prospect of a future. What will be our position in that? Our purpose, our strategy? Do we still have a role to play? Will we be relevant as we were before, or do we have to change? And if they realize what their place could be, then this key question comes: can we make profit in that world? Can we still be the company with the shareholders' value that we used to create in the past? Big question mark. So I believe now we are in this prospect phase. I believe that companies and organizations and governments and individuals realize that we will not go back entirely to the old normal. We will go to a new normal, only nobody really knows what it looks like. So now, oops, I just have to change one thing. So my apologies for this. There's a slight hiccup in the slides. And we are back. So sorry for that. So how can you get an idea of what the future could look like? Now, it's difficult, but we have created a simple model, and I will walk you through this in just 2 minutes. It's a simple model, but we have applied it recently to both large retailers, to Unilever, to some others, to at least get an idea of what's happening and how impactful these things could be. Now, we have created 5 post-corona metaphors. There used to be 7, but that was too complicated, so we shuffled a bit. There are 5 metaphors, and these 5 metaphors stand for large areas of where change could happen. And what is the first one? The first one actually is already mentioned. It's the urban village. It is this question that you should ask yourself: is there a possibility that this circular model, people opting to stay home for work, or at least closer to home for work, that it becomes a reality? That if that becomes a reality, this will mean an acceleration of new business models. And maybe just the answer to Corona and investing more in e-commerce is also a driver for people saying, well, there's more e-commerce, so I don't have to move. So it's all intertwined. In that idea, the return of local. Will we actually say, well, local manufacturing, local farming, it's possible, let's invest in this. And as a result, will we embrace different mobility models? So that's the first one. Now, I will mention this again. This is not These are not trends that I believe will happen. These are things that if you want to see your future, you should ask yourself some questions about. And I will clarify these questions in 2 minutes from now. The second metaphor is what I call the jazzy organization. And the jazzy organization, that is actually this idea that maybe organizations in the core should restructure themselves in a more modular way, in a more flexible way, so that if they get hit by the next system shock, whatever it is, and if they are hit badly, that they can still, they have this flexibility, this agility, this what we call adaptive resilience. So you are resilient, but you can adapt while you have to stand up again in a way that traditional companies cannot do, by empowering structures and empowering organizations or part of the organization and people, having new alliances, not everything from a long distance in a global model, in a local model and a global model, but also having things locally in a more local model. So new combinations, new partnerships, ecosystems. Solving the challenge, if that is indeed the case, how can we, as a dispersed organization, how can we manage this? How can we show leadership from a distance? So that's the second metaphor. There's much material underneath, but just to give you an idea, how much of this could happen? How much of the organizations that we know today could embrace this more modular, jazzy way of functioning? And with jazzy, we mean it's like with the music. I mean, it's very strict until the moment that you have to start to improvise. And then it can go all directions, and then it becomes strict again, because even jazz, it has its patterns. The third one is the anti-fragile society. So where the previous one was about the company, what about what's happening in society? Will, as a society as a whole, will we embrace digital more? Will it accelerate for the first time in 20, 25 years at a speed that was unseen before? Will we see a form of protectionism, closing down borders, not trusting our neighbors in the way we did maybe before Corona? We have seen it during Corona. Will we as regions say, well, let's invest in strategic reserves and strategic assets and strategic IP and so on? Will we move into a world of less? I mean, will we go to recessions? Will more people than the millions that already lost, again, will more people than the millions that already lost their jobs lose their work? Will we all have to turn to flex work to just make everything work? We don't know. So will we be able to survive in a world of less, and will there be a world of less? Will we need more flexibility to deal with that on level of society, people, individuals? I mean, structures, taxes, who knows? The hybrid pop-up world that's my favorite. Is it imaginable that we have a world in which closing down stores, it's not an action, a negative action because of lockdown, but it's because it's normal, we don't need them now, so we just close them. And everything becomes pop-up and pop out, pop in, pop out, pop in. So we need, I mean, there's a new season, fashion seasons. For 3 months we have stores, and then we don't have stores. And then for 3 months we have people, and then these people shift to the back office or to other logistics elements in our value chain, like for home delivery. So is that imaginable that if we are forced for more lockdowns, that actually becomes the new normal, to have flexibility, that we don't have all of these big offices, we just have temporary spaces. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't, and then we don't. And then with surging prices like Uber, could that actually work? And then the last metaphor, is it imaginable that this is actually a game changer? This is a momentum for introducing more purpose, so that something that I personally believe in could happen, but it's just a belief, that we get a generation C, a group of people of all ages saying, well, we have learned some lessons. From now on, we will do things differently. We will make other choices in life. We will want to live more, I mean, maybe with a better life balance, work-life balance, or more focus on, I mean, sustainability, just to say something. Is that actually something that businesses will embrace? Will embracing purpose-driven business models be like a competitive advantage towards large industrial players worldwide, big tech players worldwide that just go for volume? Could that make a local difference? And then the last one is, do we believe that governments will take this momentum, use this momentum to say, well, if you want some support from us, and you want the relance plan to be funded, and you want whatever, even banks, if you want to fund people's business as well, they have to be sustainable. They have to be part of the Green Deal, in that if you don't do it, we don't fund it. So we don't save you. Is that momentum real? Now, there are many drivers underneath this, but the idea is that if you would walk through them and you reflect for yourself, there are 2 questions you should ask yourself. For each of these possible drivers for these 5 metaphors, how likely are they to happen and impact you? Is it likely in your business that indeed we will have, let's pick just one, we have a world of less. People have less income. Maybe they spend less, maybe they spend differently, but they have less. We get a recession. Trust of companies in investing is maybe at a low. So if we believe that, how much impact would that have on you? And then the second question you have to answer is on the other X, how ready are you for that? Because something can have a huge impact, but you're ready because that's your core, that's who you are. So go on, let it come. I mean, that's an invitation to win if you're ready for something with a lot of impact, because a lot of other people will not be ready for that. So, but imagine you have a lot of these drivers with a lot of impact and you're not ready. Then you should act now. That actually is the basis for a future scenario. You see, you believe that these things could happen. You say, I can draft a vision of the future, but I also should draft a strategy because I have to get there and I'm not ready. So these take actions, these ideas of the vision of the future. So actually by doing that, you can start mapping things out of this schema with all of the possible future elements that are not relevant, will not happen. I don't believe that. All that are relevant can impact us, will impact us. Not ready for that. That's attention we should devote to that. If you're ready and it has impact, you can lead that market. Do it. If you believe it doesn't have any impact and you get challenged and other people also say it doesn't have any impact, ignore it. It's just loss of focus. So that brings me to the end of my story. Nothing of what I said is true because it's all about the future. A couple of my analyses about where we are today and the past, they were based on scientific material and a lot of academic research, not done by myself, but by others. I just stole the material. But every time you look at the future, it's not the truth. These are possibilities. They're not even trends. They become trends if you believe in them. And if you believe in them, you can believe in a future you can make your own. And if you do this with this model, you can actually start to invent your own post-corona future. And once you can dream it, you can plan for it. And if you can plan for it, slowly it will start to happen. So that's the end of my story. Who am I? I was not introduced, but I was slightly introduced in the beginning, but get out of the way of my slides. So you can always contact me. I'm in this business for 25 years. I've created many companies. I've written several books. I do a lot of keynote presentations, and now I do them remotely. So I will share the slides. You can contact me through my mobile or email or any other way of communication. I represent this company called Scopernia, and we are based in Belgium and in Dubai. We are a very small consulting firm, about 10 people, and this is the only thing we do. So the only thing we do is thinking about transformation, and that used to be digital transformation, and then it became societal transformation together with digital. That was the purpose of my book. And then now it's societal transformation, digital, and Corona that is also impacting those futures. And just to give you an idea for the companies we work for, I will not spend too much time on that. It's wide, it's a variety of different companies in different industries. So I hope I've inspired you just a little bit or maybe a lot. If that's the case, I'm very grateful for that. Maybe there are questions. To be honest, I haven't been able to track them all. If you want to contact me, again, my contact details are there on the slide. If you want my slides, just drop me a mail. If you want to talk about maybe how we can help you, again, just communicate and we will be there for you. Now, I think it's time for questions, right?
Indeed it is. If anybody's got questions, please can you pop it into the chat box while we're waiting for all the bits and pieces to come through. Jo, I have a question about the manufacturing sector. You know, it sounds to me like we are not only going to potentially shorten the supply chain, but we're actually circumnavigating the traditional models. With this in mind, are you saying that we can expect to see a shift in the economy of shared assets over ownership? So not only are we looking at an Airbnb type of environment or shared vehicles, but things like shared airplanes and shared containers. So shared assets on a massive level.
I'm absolutely convinced that that will become the new normal, both in B2C, which we have already seen now with, again, Uber, Deliveroo, all of these kinds of things where you have shared assets, but they are part of a large platform operator, Airbnb and the likes. But this is also happening in B2B. One of our clients was Volvo Trucks, and already 3-4 years ago, they actually had the strategy of selling capacity, no longer trucks to dealers or through dealers to transportation companies, but really like Amazon is selling the cloud, selling capacity to bring stuff from A to B. So, and you start to see it everywhere. When I talk about this cooperative living, it's not about shared housing and all of these hippie style things. It's about banks looking together with construction companies on how they can optimize real estate and how they can become a platform operator themselves, not selling it, but maybe selling it indirectly through these cooperative shares, or just renting it out in a per use model. You start to see it everywhere, and it can indeed accelerate because digital actually forced us into this usage instead of ownership model. And digital gets accelerated because of Corona. So it's not maybe directly Corona accelerating these patterns, but it is the embracing of digital business models. And underneath these business models, having stuff, just selling goods, is not as profitable for the new style companies than having people use these goods. And I think the best example here is Elon Musk from Tesla saying, from the moment that our cars will be truly autonomous, self-driving, you will be no longer able to buy them as a consumer, because we will make much more money when we keep them and we let you use them.
Do you think that kind of model would be even a subscription type of model? So
that could be. It exists already in the US. You have Mercedes-Benz. You have a subscription, starts at $1,200 US, and then it goes up depending on the kind of models you have. And then you have a subscription to their cars. So what you have is a car and you have an app. And if you say, well, I want another car, you have the SUV, you want a sports model, you just configure it, you pick one from the app and you get a butler service replacing your car. And you can drive for days or weeks or months, and then you replace it again. And you pay a permanent fee. From the moment that happens, Mercedes-Benz has no incentive whatsoever to create new models anymore. And then to seduce you every 3-4 years to buy a new car, you have every incentive, like again, Tesla is doing, to say, well, we make batteries that go 1,000,000 miles. Because every mile driven, every month that you have another person subscribe to this service brings in more money. So indeed, this actually could turn around completely the economical thinking. And in my book, I call it evolving from the stuff economy, an economy driven by making things out of raw material. And the purpose, the essence of the economy is selling those things, to a peak stuff economy where the purpose is we still have those things, but we don't sell them, we use them. And what we sell is the usage on top of these things. So there's no incentive to just replace more stuff as long as the stuff is still valuable.
Okay, so you're talking about repurposing what we have rather than creating something new.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, it sounds like from what you're saying, we're going to be producing less and repurposing obviously what we have. And that seems to have quite a commercial impact on that's going to be looming for the construction industry, property industries, automotive industries. I mean, a lot of business models are going to change completely.
Absolutely.
Do you foresee, before I give over to anybody else with the other questions, do you foresee a deglobalization of sorts? Because when you talk about something called global, it makes me think that we're going to be focusing less on international trade and more on internal trade and actually feeding our own economies with using our local suppliers more than anything else.
But I use the term global. Actually, it was used 20 years ago when the internet came around for the first time. But I use it as this mix. I don't believe that the globalization will disappear. But I do believe that many more local solutions will be encouraged, or because consumers ask for it, or because suppliers and manufacturers believe it's a proper alternative and it can defend them from global models and the big tech and the global platform players. So if they have something local, it can make them different. And I also believe that governments can play a role, maybe on a fiscal level and so on. So I believe there is absolutely a space for that, but it will be in a balance. We will still have a lot of cheaply produced global stuff from China flowing into the rest of the world, but not everything as it is today. So it's finding this new balance. And yes, indeed, when that happens, it becomes very interesting because then we will have more local supply chains. We will have, and they will be more expensive, but from the moment that we start charging, for instance, the climate impact of long distance mobility and transportation to get raw material from A to B and then process it and bring it from B to C and then from C to A again, which we are doing today because it's so cheap and often not taxed. There's talk that in Europe, the outer boundaries will get taxed for stuff that is not sustainably produced, while in Europe we want these sustainable rules. So something from China coming in would suddenly become more expensive. And then that locally produced thing becomes competitive again. So I believe indeed in that new balance, and that will change business models, that will change value chains, that will change employment, that will change so many things. And maybe in local regions, there is again space to build local IP, local technology. It's not just coming from all China or the US alone.
Oh, I could sit here and ask you many, many questions, but I don't want to take up everybody else's time. For anybody that's got...
I've got a couple of questions in chat, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, privately from Georgina. Maybe the first millions of people have lost their jobs and many may never work again. Then what? What if they are in their 50s and 60s? People can retrain up to a point, but who will employ them? This is a key question. To be honest, I do believe that maybe jobs will not be lost permanently because of Corona. I don't believe that. But I do believe that maybe the next 2, 3, 4, even 5 years, it will be very difficult depending on the region of the world and how much support there was from local governments and banks and so on. So if you are living in the US, for instance, where if you get fired, you're on your own. I don't know how that is in other regions. I know how that is in the Emirates, for instance. Yes, these are very, very difficult times, definitely for people in their 50s and 60s. In a more, but I believe, if you're in the 60s, by the time the new economy actually has restarted, probably you're out of the system. So this will be very difficult for these people. For other people, I do believe that with everything we described and with technology entering the workspace more, I believe we will get new jobs. We will get, in my book, for instance, I describe robot shepherds, people managing fleets of robots doing things from home delivery to other things. Still, people will be around there. As I said, vertical farming, we can have supermarket farmers. So if supermarkets have vertical farms, we could have people that in the city centers today would not have a job opportunity, could have a job opportunity tomorrow. Again, you are a doctor, you were never the smartest, but a very empathic doctor. Maybe you could not even get your degree in the past, but if a machine is taking over some of the knowledge tasks, and because you're so empathic, maybe you are a better doctor tomorrow than you were yesterday. So I do believe there are opportunities. But because of Corona, we are facing 2, 3, maybe 5 years of very difficult times for a lot of people, unfortunately. Another question from Georgina, not so much freedom in the Emirates due to labor laws and government controls the population and who is allowed to work here. Yeah, only 3-year visa. So that's a remark, it's not a question. It's true. And of course, I've been looking at the situation from the eyes of about 1 billion people in Europe, US, some other regions, but there are other regions with free market economies, with other political systems. And that's, they have their own particular way of managing these crises and maybe unrest and how people will respond to that.
I see there's one from Mr. Fullion. Once we go to a small community mindset and circular living, we will start the trading economy and less traditional business. Then the tax collection will change and the power will move back from governments to the people. How do you see this transition?
Well, I'm not sure that we will trade, because if you trade, you need, kind of a balance of what you want and what you need and what you have to trade for that. And money it's a very good system in between to say, well, I don't need like more shoes because you want bread and I'm a baker and you're a shoemaker. Our needs are more diverse than, what a trading system, I believe, could actually anticipate for. I could imagine that some things are being traded for. I do more believe that, this neutral currency in between will keep, it will stay in existence, but maybe it will become like, although no one's talking about that anymore, something like Bitcoin or something like that. So I don't really believe that the world will become even more complex. We will have access to even more solutions, not necessarily products. So trading my Netflix, I can't trade with Netflix. I still have to pay for my subscription. I can't go to them, to Hastings and say, you want my shoes? I make shoes locally. So we still have something in between that is identifiable and thus can be taxed locally, I believe.
Do you have any more questions on your side? Okay. Well, it's now 7 o'clock, so thank you very much, Jo. We really appreciate your time and the wonderful ideas that you shared with us. And to everybody still online with us, if you have any other questions, please send an email to Jo. His details are on the screen. And thanks very much, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Jo, we'll chat to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, and enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.